I'm Harper Mitchell, 28 years old, founder and CEO of LumiTech, a Denver-based sustainable energy startup that's just completed its seed round. I never expected my 28th birthday to feel like a high-stakes poker game, but there I was, standing on the glass-railed rooftop of our penthouse in Cherry Creek. Champagne flute trembling in my hand, I scanned the crowd. My father, David, in a tailored navy suit whose legal eagle reputation precedes him. My mother, Linda, glowing in emerald silk as a former hedge fund manager. And Avery, my 25-year-old sister and free-spirited artist, whose knowing smile made my pulse race. I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate," I began, voice steady despite the butterflies. Just as I lifted my glass, Avery's laugh cut through the night air. "Oh, Harper," she said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "We all know you didn't just fundraise, you borrowed $50,000 from the family savings to launch LumiTech." Gasps rippled across the rooftop. Before I could recover, the restaurant manager appeared at the patio door. "Excuse me, Ms. Mitchell," he murmured. "We have a problem with the payment." I forced a smile and, under my breath, whispered, "Let's see how far I can really push them tonight." Before we delve into the journey that shaped me, pause and ask yourself, what moment in your past fuels your relentless drive today? I've always believed that understanding where I come from is the key to knowing why I fight so hard for where I'm going. Growing up in Cherry Creek, Denver, my childhood was defined by both privilege and pressure. My father, David Mitchell, made his name as a corporate defense attorney, billing more than $500 per hour on multi-million-dollar cases, while my mother, Linda, ran a mid-size investment fund, meticulously tracking mortgage portfolios on homes worth up to $650,000, 0 cents each. They spared no expense on our futures. Private schools that cost nearly $25,000, 0 cents a year. Summer language camps in Europe priced at €4,000, 0 cents apiece, and family vacations that regularly tallied five-figure budgets. And yet, for all that financial muscle, the real currency of my household was comparison. My older brother Cole was the golden child. He graduated from the University of Colorado with a 3.9 GPA, won a fellowship at Oxford, and today teaches economics in Boulder. I can still see the black tie celebration at the Brown Palace Hotel when he defended his dissertation, Caviar, a violin trio, and not a single thought spared for the 12-year-old me, fresh off a regional science fair victory. At 12, I should have been elated. Instead, I felt invisible. My little sister Avery, 2 years younger than me and now a contemporary painter, represented in a Chelsea gallery, suffered a similar fate. I'll never forget my mother whispering to a friend on Avery's opening night, "I just don't understand how art can be a real career." That sting from my mother's doubt cut deeper than any critique from a teacher. Despite it all, I marched to my own drumbeat. By age 7, I was tinkering with circuits and solar cells in our garage, turned lab, ferrying homemade prototypes to science fairs and dreaming of harnessing clean energy on every rooftop. At graduation, I secured a $5,000 0 cents grant from the Colorado Governor's STEM initiative, proof, I thought, that I could truly stand my ground among novelists and professors in my family. Yet even with that validation, I felt like an afterthought until Stanford accepted me for engineering. Stanford changed me. An internship at Tesla's Gigafactory near Reno taught me more in 12-hour days optimizing battery modules than any textbook ever could. I earned $2,500 0 cents a month, built professional contacts, and returned to Denver with $15,000 0 cents in savings and a burning conviction: I would launch LumiTech, a company focused on modular solar units for urban rooftops. I still remember the tension when I first told my parents. My father warned, "Renewables are volatile, you could crash and burn." My mother asked, "You're giving up a solid engineering career for what, selling panels to condo owners?" Cole, ever the diplomat, said, "It's ambitious, just don't do anything reckless." Only Avery, the free spirit, looked me in the eye and said, "I believe in you." Behind closed doors, though, that belief was always weighed against the fear of failure. 2 months before my seed round, I discovered that my mother had quietly siphoned $10,000, 0 cents, from my projected R&D budget to cover emergency household expenses. In reality, she'd used it to buy into a speculative biotech position that lost 30% of its value in 6 weeks. When I confronted her over dinner, she confessed through tears that she'd been scared and thought I could cover the loss. The betrayal stung, but it also galvanized me. I wasn't just battling market forces, I was fighting my own family's fears. Not long after, a video conference meant to finalize my pitch deck was gate-crashed by my mother-in-law, Karen, a high school English teacher in Naperville. She peered into my makeshift office and declared, "I once vetoed Lucas's plan when he pitched it at our family dinner." That cold interruption felt like a slap, a reminder that 2 generations of doubts stood between me and the support I desperately needed. Yet amid the doubts, there were moments of solace. One crisp autumn afternoon when I was 16, I found Avery painting abstract swirls in my treehouse lab. She looked up, handed me a paintbrush dipped in cobalt blue, and said, "You know, Harper, you're smarter than any of them think. Don't let them tell you otherwise." We sat side by side, me adjusting resistors, her mixing pigments, and for the first time, I felt seen. Years later, after a brutal email exchange with my parents, I retreated to our Capitol Hill apartment. Lucas, my husband and fellow Stanford alum, brought me a $4.75 coffee from our corner cafe and whispered, "You've got this, babe. I believe in your vision." He kissed my forehead and I felt rooted rather than adrift. His unwavering support reminded me that if my own family wavered, at least one person would never question my competence. But the crucible wasn't over. One evening I received a text from my cousin Emma, living in Seattle. "Harper, is everything okay with your funding? Saw some rumors." Rumors? I stared at the words, realizing that whispers of doubt had leaked beyond our living rooms into the wider world. Who was undermining me? With each new stakeholder, angel investors, mentors, family, I learned that the real battleground wasn't just the market but trust itself. Yet through every sting of skepticism, there were triumphs too. I'll never forget the first time I stood on the roof of my Cherry Creek townhouse, watching our inverter hum as midday sun powered my home office. That simple moment, sunlight turning into clean energy, felt like a victory, proof that I could translate theory into reality. It was in those small triumphs, those sunset-lit successes, that I forged the conviction I would need for the chapters still to come. The day I hit send on that reply all email should have been a triumph. I'd just closed a verbal commitment for a $200,000 0-cent seed investment in Lumitech, and I wanted my family to celebrate with me. At 10:17 p.m., I forwarded the investor's congratulatory note, complete with term sheet highlights, to our Mitchell family thread, signing off, "Can't wait to celebrate with you all." I pictured my parents rejoicing, Avery cheering me on, and Cole offering his sage brotherly advice. Instead, the collective response was icy. By noon, my inbox pinged with my mother's reply, "Be careful, Harper. Startup life is unpredictable. Don't get ahead of yourself." My heart sank, but I was determined to stay positive. 10 minutes later, Avery chimed in, "Wow, congrats, but hope you actually know what you're doing." That ellipsis felt like a punch to the gut. If my own sister couldn't be fully supportive, who could? I spent the afternoon oscillating between exhilaration and dread. I called Lucas first. His steady voice was the only thing keeping me sane. "They'll come around," he assured me. But when I checked my phone again, I saw a group message from Cole. "Congrats, Harp. If you need help with your projections, let me know." His tone was polite but distant, like he was acknowledging my success from across a crowded room. That evening, over a charcuterie board at our Capitol Hill apartment, I tried to rally my confidence. "Tomorrow's fine," I said. We'll chat in person. Lucas squeezed my hand. Just wait until dinner, he promised. I nodded, but sleep felt distant. At 2:07, I awoke to the glow of my phone. A family group photo had arrived, our holiday card from last year, with a single comment from Mom. Let's make sure this holiday looks just as picture perfect. In the thread below, someone had printed my seed round email and taped it to the refrigerator door in their kitchen. Avery had Snapchatted a photo of it with the caption, "Family newsflash, Harper's a real entrepreneur now." The message had 150 views already. I stared at the screen, disbelief giving way to a cold knot in my stomach. They weren't celebrating. They were broadcasting my private milestone and judging it. The next morning, bleary-eyed, I showed Lucas the printout. He frowned. That's unusual." I swallowed hard. It's more than unusual, it's invasive. I spent my commute drafting a text to Cole. "Can you ask Mom and Dad to delete that post? It's personal." No reply. I arrived at the office jittery, convinced every colleague would soon know my family thought I was reckless. At 11:30 a.m., Avery's story popped up on Instagram, an image of my email with the caption, "Seed round secured. Let's see if Harper can actually pull this off," tagged, "Family drama." Comments flooded in, congratulations mixed with skeptical emojis. My chest tightened. I clicked View Insights out of habit. The story had reached over 700 people, including local journalists who might think it was a PR stunt. Panicking, I called my mother-in-law Karen, hoping for comfort. After 2 rings, she picked up. "Harper, sweetie, I saw that you asked for $50,000 from your family. Do you really need that much?" Her question felt like a dagger. She wasn't asking to help, she was questioning my judgment. I froze, unsure how to respond. "It's part of the round, Mom," I managed. She sighed. "Just be prudent." Then she hung up. In that moment, I realized the whispers had morphed into outright doubt. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on refining the deck for a follow-up call with a second investor. My phone buzzed with a Slack message from our operations lead. "Saw the family post. We good?" The professional impact of my family's overexposure hit me hard. If my team sensed weakness, they'd question Lumitech's stability. I stood up, walked to the window overlooking downtown Denver, and took a deep breath. This was more than family drama. It was a test of my leadership. By 4 p.m. I'd drafted a plan. A brief, sincere email to the family, explaining why the private seed update wasn't meant for public consumption, and a request to remove the posts. I hit send, with trembling fingers, then called Cole. His voicemail greeting popped in. "Hey, it's Cole. Can't talk right now. Leave a message." I hesitated, then left a measured message. "Cole, hey, it's me. I need you guys to respect my privacy and help me control how this news is shared. It's critical for our next steps." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the monitor, wondering if I'd gone too far. By the time I left the office at 7 p.m., I hadn't heard back. My phone pinged as I stepped onto the porch. A reply from Cole. On it, talk tomorrow. And a text from Avery. Deleted the post, sorry if I overstepped. Relief washed over me, mixed with lingering hurt. They'd finally acknowledged my request, but the damage was done. My so-called launch party was replaced by late-night anxiety calls, private appeals, and the unsettling realization that earning my family's respect would require far more than a seed round announcement. That night, as I settled into bed, I drafted a new rule for myself. Never mix family channels with business updates. If Lumitech was going to fly, I'd need boundaries as rigid as the solar cells I designed, and the courage to enforce them, no matter how personal the cost. The invitation arrived on a crisp Friday morning, a family dinner at Cole's townhouse in Boulder. He promised a casual evening, just us and a few close relatives, he texted at 9:03 IEM. By the time I arrived at 6:45 p.m., the foyer was already abuzz with chatter. My parents, David and Linda Mitchell, stood next to Avery, all three dressed in their Sunday best even though it was Friday. On the other side, my in-laws Karen and Mark Davenport hovered by the bar, engaged in polite small talk with Cole's wife, Allison, and their two kids. I carried my laptop bag over one shoulder and my heart in my throat. Cole greeted me with a nervous hug. "Hey, Harp," he whispered. "Just stick to the facts tonight. We've got the projector in the living room." I nodded, steeling myself. The dining room table was set with a simple white runner, flickering candles, and place cards spelling out names in elegant script. At the head of the table, my parents' names. Next to them, Avery's in voluminous Rebecca Pewter. Then me. And finally, on the opposite end, the Davenport clan. By 7:10 p.m., everyone had taken their seats. Cole tapped his wine glass, Pinot Noir, $42.00 a bottle, and cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Harper has asked to address some concerns about Lumitech's seed round. She'll walk us through the details." My stomach clenched. I'd prepared meticulously a 15-slide deck outlining the $200,000 0-cent commitment from Brightspark Ventures, projected burn rate of $8,000, 0 cents per month, and break even in 24 months. Now, I had to deliver it in front of the only people whose approval still mattered. I hit play on the projector remote. Slide 1 glowed on the wall. Lumitech seed round $200,000, 0 cents committed. I cleared my throat. "I know the past weeks have been tense. You saw my email on the family thread and reactions went sideways. Tonight I'd like to clarify exactly what's happening with Lumitech's financing and why I asked for your support." I clicked to slide 2, an overview of Brightspark Ventures' due diligence report and signed term sheet. I highlighted the investor's track record, 3 exits averaging 5x return, and briefly explained the valuation cap of $1,500,000, 0 cents. A murmur rippled around the room. My mother shifted in her seat, my father's jaw tightened. I clicked to slide 3 showing my projected use of funds, $50,000, 0 cents for inventory of modular panels, $60,000, 0 cents for R&D prototyping, $40,000, 0 cents for marketing and PR, $20,000, 0 cents for legal and compliance, and $30,000, 0 cents reserved for operating expense. Each number was backed by vendor quotes and invoices I'd collected over weeks. I held their gaze. "Every cent has a line item and a purpose," I said. "I borrowed $50,000, 0 cents from my family savings last December as a bridge to secure these orders, repayable from this round." That's when Avery reached under the table and slid a crisp, color-printed page across the runner toward my mother. Mom picked it up. A holiday shopping receipt for $15,324.87, dated December 18th, printed with my name and an account number matching the family savings fund. "Explain this," Avery said, voice calm but cold. I felt the room's temperature drop. I stared at the receipt, my throat suddenly dry. "That's not mine," I managed. "Someone fabricated it." My father's eyes narrowed. "So you've been lying about borrowing from the fund?" he asked, voice low. "You can't even get that right." The accusation felt like a slap. I reached for my laptop. "I have my bank statement here," I said, switching to slide 4. A scan of my savings account transaction history showing precisely $50,000, 0 cents withdrawn on December 12 and repaid on March 3 with capital from the Angel round. The deposit from Brightspark on March 1, that covered the bridge loan in full. I clicked to slide 5, zooming in on the transaction IDs. No $15,000, 0 cents holiday splurge. That receipt is fake. A heavy silence settled. My mother examined the bank printout, her eyes welling. "Why would someone do this?" she whispered. My pulse hammered. "Because someone wants to derail Lumitech," I said, "and they're willing to weaponize family trust." I glanced at Avery. She looked contrite, almost, but her lips pressed into a line of steel. Before the moment could breathe, my father's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked back at me. "Your attorney just called," he announced. "Our family lawyer, Mark Reynolds, wants to meet tomorrow. He says you've breached some family agreement by misusing funds." My heart lurched. I'd signed no such agreement. "I haven't misused a cent," I said. "If you call a lawyer, you're escalating suspicion instead of seeking the truth." Avery folded her arms. "Harper, did you ever consider that mixing family money with business was a mistake?" she asked, eyes softening just enough to sting. "Now we have to involve lawyers." My mother's shoulders shook. My father's grip on his glass tightened. The Davenports looked on uncomfortably. Mark Davenport pinched the bridge of his nose. Karen stared at the floor. I closed my laptop. "I see how this looks," I said, voice trembling but steady. "Maybe I should have been more transparent. I regret that. But I did not fabricate documents. If you doubt me, check with Bright Spark, check with my bank, check with the accountant I hired." I exhaled. "If you'd prefer to handle this with a lawyer, fine. But tomorrow you'll see the facts speak for themselves." Cole intervened, standing up. "Let's pause. We'll reconvene after you've had time to verify everything." He nodded at me. "Take a breath, Harper." I drew in a shaky breath and sat back down, fighting tears. The guests quietly began to leave their seats. Dishes were removed. The tension was so thick I could taste it. On my right, my husband Lucas reached for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. In the hallway, just before I slipped away to collect myself, I caught sight of my Aunt Evelyn hovering by the buffet. She mouthed, "I believe you." It was the first flicker of support I'd seen. I gave her a small nod. Then I stepped into the powder room and locked the door. I leaned against the cool marble sink and let the adrenaline drain. My reflection in the mirror looked back at me. Eyes red-rimmed, cheeks pale. How had it come to this? A family dinner meant to heal had become the stage for the biggest betrayal of my life. Someone had weaponized our trust with false evidence, dragged a lawyer into our home, and humiliated me in front of both sides of my family. After catching my breath, I washed my face and reapplied lipstick, deep berry, my signature shade for battle. I checked my phone. No new messages from Cole or Mom. Avery had texted, "Sorry, if you need backup, let me know." Backup was small comfort when doubt had already been sown. I returned to the living room to find my father and mother in a hushed conversation. My mother's shoulders shook. My father's head was bowed. When I approached, my father looked up. "We're going to verify every detail," he said quietly. "We'll meet with Mark Reynolds tomorrow. You're welcome to join." My mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "We just want the truth," she whispered. "Truth." I swallowed hard. "I'll be there," I said. "And I'll bring everything you need." I wasn't sure what else I could do tonight. The betrayal had cut deeper than any professional setback ever could. I realized, as I looked around at the remnants of that dinner, empty wine glasses, flickering candle stubs, that this was no longer just a family conflict. It was a crossroads for Lumitech, and for my identity. If I survived tomorrow's legal scrutiny with my reputation intact, I'd emerge stronger. If not, I wasn't sure I'd ever forgive myself. Before leaving Boulder, Allison pulled me aside. "Remember why you started this," she said, voice low and fierce. "You're fighting for clean energy, for your vision. Don't let this betrayal derail you." She handed me a small envelope. Inside, a handwritten note from Cole, "Believe in yourself as I believe in you," and a $1,000 0 cents check for peace of mind. I hugged her, clutching the envelope like a life raft. Driving back to Denver through the mountain pass, the streetlights blurred into lines of white and amber. I repeated Allison's words over and over. "Remember why you started this." The night air whooshed past, but inside my car, time slowed. I realized that this family betrayal, this weaponized lie, was the greatest test I'd ever faced. And like every other challenge, I would meet it head-on. Tomorrow, in my father's lawyer's office, I'd lay out the truth with every slide, every bank statement, and every witness name. I'd prove that trust can be rebuilt, even after the most devastating betrayal. But tonight, I let myself feel the hurt, because only by acknowledging it could I move forward, ready to claim what was mine, not just the seed funding for Lumitech, but the respect of the family I'd loved my whole life. I slammed the door of our Capitol Hill townhouse behind me and bolted up the spiral staircase, each step echoing the tremor in my chest. The muffled laughter drifting from the living room felt like a cruel reminder of a world that no longer included me. In the guest bedroom, I dropped my heels and peeled off my jacket, collapsing onto the edge of the bed. Bank statements, printed emails, the fabricated holiday receipt, all lay scattered on the floor, physical proof of last night's betrayal. My body shook with silent sobs as I stared at the ceiling, the weight of my family's doubt pressing down like a lead cloak. Every whispered caution about the volatility of clean energy, every sideways glance I'd endured as a woman entrepreneur, it all coalesced into one undeniable truth. I had failed my own family. My phone buzzed against the nightstand and I fought the urge to ignore it. A text from Avery blinked on the screen. "Harper, I'm so sorry. That receipt fact check was over the line. I believe you. Call me." Even her apology stung, salty against my raw wound. I typed back, hands trembling. "I'll call soon." A FaceTime request from Lucas followed and I answered, watching his concerned face fill the small screen. I slid down to the floor, leaning against the wall. "I'm not okay," I whispered, burying my face in my hands. His voice was steady even as mine cracked. "They'll see the truth tomorrow," he promised, rubbing circles on my back. But the thought of sitting across from my parents and a lawyer, facts laid bare yet still disbelieved, felt like standing naked in a courtroom of my own making. In desperation, I reached for my notebook and shot Dr. Garcia, my high school mentor, a frantic text. "I need advice. Family turned on me, lawyer involved." Her reply was almost immediate. "Call me now." I dialed as my tears subsided into a dull ache. When she answered, I spilled the entire story. The dinner, the fake receipt, the legal threat. Dr. Garcia listened with characteristic calm, then dropped a revelation that stunned me silent. "Harper, I still have your father's old partnership records from 8. He lost $20,000 when his first biotech venture folded." The irony cut deep. My father, the unflappable litigation attorney, had once risked family money exactly as I had. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, voice catching. "Because the lesson only mattered when you needed it," she replied gently. "Use it. You're not alone in risk." As midnight approached, I felt the first faint ember of resolve stir beneath the ash of my anguish. I flipped to a blank page in my notebook and wrote, "Tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. arrive early. Bring every hard copy, play that investor audio, demand transparency, outline repayment plan." Writing those words transformed the chaos in my chest into purpose. Each sentence was a brick, rebuilding the foundation of my confidence. My hands stopped shaking as I envisioned the meeting room, the sound of verified bank transactions filtering through the speakers, the look on my father's face when he recognized his own past failures mirrored in my courage. I realized my collapse had been necessary. It had burned away any pretense and left only the unvarnished truth. Finally, exhaustion claimed me. I tucked my notebook under my arm, switched off my phone, and lay flat on the bed, the door locked against further intrusions. My last waking thought was a promise. Tomorrow I would no longer be the insecure daughter pleading for approval, but the founder who dared to risk everything for clean energy. In that unwavering resolve, I felt a flicker of strength ignite. Emotional collapse had not defeated me, it had forged me for the fight ahead. I woke before sunrise the next morning, heart still pounding from the night's tidal wave of emotion. The digital clock on my nightstand read 5:47 a.m. in soft red digits. I drew a shuddering breath, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and crumpled my notebook from last night into my backpack, its pages now etched with a battle plan instead of tear stains. Lucas was already gone, off to the Gigafactory site meeting he'd arranged with a potential client in Aurora. I felt a pang of longing for his steady presence, but I knew this spark of recovery had to come from within me. I laced up my running shoes and stepped into the chill of the thin Denver morning. By 6:15 a.m. I was at Washington Park, the mist hovering above the lake like a promise of renewal. I breathed deeply, the crisp air filling my lungs. The sky shifted from ink to lavender as the sun crept over the horizon. At a picnic table near the boathouse, I pulled out my phone and tapped Dr. Garcia's number. "Harper, how are you feeling?" Her warm voice crackled through the speaker. "Determined," I said, wrapping my fingers around a $4.50 latte from the park's concession stand. "I've outlined every step for today's meeting, hard copies, audio recordings, banking statements, but I need your blessing." "You already have it," she replied. "Remember that $20,000? 0 cents your dad lost? Your willingness to risk and learn is what makes you a founder. Let that knowledge anchor you." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you," I whispered. Her words felt like a lifeline, reminding me that risk was universal, not gendered or generation limited. After our call, I tucked the latte into my backpack beside my packed binder, tabbed with color-coded dividers for investor call, bank records, and legal correspondence. I reviewed the bullets. 1. Arrive at 8 a.m. sharp. 2. Ask Dad to listen to the December 12 investor call audio. 3. Present bank statements showing the $50,000 0 cents bridge loan repayment. 4. Request we open Dad's old venture files. 5. End by proposing the 12-month repayment schedule for the $50,000 0 cents. By 7:30 IMO, I jogged back to the townhouse, sweat on my brow but a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I texted Lucas, "Meet me at 8 a.m. Need your $4.75 cafe support and moral backup?" A minute later, I wouldn't miss it for the world. At exactly 7:58 a.m., I stepped into the polished marble lobby of my parents' law firm on 16th Street. The security guard recognized me with a curt nod as I signed in. Lucas materialized beside me, holding 2 disposable coffees. "Morning sunshine," he teased. "Ready to do this?" I exhaled, feeling the adrenaline settle into calm focus. "Let's." My parents were waiting in conference room A, leather chairs encircling a dark walnut table. My heart thumped as Dad, David Mitchell, in charcoal gray suit, looked up from his phone. Mom, Linda Mitchell, blazer crisply tailored, folded her hands on the table. Beside them sat Mark Reynolds, their family attorney, expression unreadable. I laid my binder on the table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," I began, voice steady. "I want to address every concern thoroughly so we can move forward with trust intact." Dad raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I clicked play on my phone, and the room filled with the crisp voices of Bright Spark Ventures partners referencing the $200,000 0 cents commitment, the due diligence process, and the agreed repayment schedule. As I watched Mom's hand tighten around her pen and Dad's jaw unclench, I felt a surge of vindication. Next, I distributed my printed bank statements. Here are the transactions. December 12, $50,000 0 cents withdrawal. March 3, $50,000 0 cents deposit, I explained. Dad flipped through the pages, his lawyer's eye scanning every transaction ID. This is crystal clear, he muttered. Mom exhaled. I'm sorry I doubted you, she said, voice quivering. Lucas chimed in. You can also listen to the accountant's deposit confirmation. We've got the file right here. He passed over an envelope with notarized statements. Mark Reynolds nodded. Everything checks out, no breach of agreement on Harper's part? I felt the tension in my shoulders ease, replaced by something warmer. Recognition. Then I dared to ask the pivotal question. Dad, may I see your old venture records from 2008? Dr. Garcia provided them. I'd like us to acknowledge that risk can benefit us all. Dad paused, then motioned to his briefcase. He extracted a slim folder labeled Mitchell Biotech 2008. Opening it, he found Dr. Garcia's notes and tax filings showing his $20,000 0 cents loss. He looked up, eyes shining behind his reading glasses. I forgot about all that, he admitted. I never told you because I thought it would discourage you. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Your experience teaches me that failure isn't fatal. It's part of the journey, he nodded, swallowing. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Avery, watching through the glass wall, gave me a thumbs up. With the room's energy shifted, I laid out my proposed repayment plan. Equal monthly installments of $4,166.67 over 12 months, funded by Lumitech's revenue share. I detailed projected cash flow, conservative estimates, and a clause allowing early repayment with no penalty. This structured plan ensures accountability and peace of mind, I said. Dad leaned back, nodded slowly. I'm proud of your professionalism. As Mark Reynolds summarized next steps, drafting a family trust and growth agreement to formalize what we'd discussed, I felt a thrill of liberation. The weight of last night's collapse had been replaced by collective resolve. Mom reached out to squeeze my arm. I'm proud of you, Harper, she whispered. Avery slipped into the room, exclaiming, See? You pulled it off. Lucas wrapped an arm around my shoulder and said, Told you? Later, as we walked out into the bright mid-morning sun, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I stopped at a street corner newsstand and bought a copy of the Denver Post, $2.50. On the front page, an article about rooftop solar innovations by female founders caught my eye. I smiled, realizing that today's victory was more than a family reconciliation, it was a personal rebirth. By 11 a.m. I returned home to Lumitech's warehouse, where our small team greeted me with cheers. I shared coffee, and recounting the morning's breakthroughs, I watched their faces, relief, pride, renewed confidence. In that moment, I knew the spark had ignited not just in me, but in all of us. That afternoon, I drafted an email to my extended family and our core team. A brief note of gratitude, a summary of our agreement, and an open invitation to join our next board meeting. I attached a photo of Dad, Mom, and me holding the signed agreement in Dad's office. Hitting send felt euphoric. My past doubts finally transformed into transparent triumphs. As evening fell and I collapsed onto the sofa, Lucas by my side, I reflected on the day's journey. The recovery spark wasn't a sudden miracle. It was the product of early morning resolve, strategic planning, allyship, and the courage to confront doubt head-on. I pulled Lucas close and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." He kissed my temple. "Always," he said. Tomorrow, the world would see Lumitech's progress anew, unshadowed by whispers and false receipts. Tonight I would celebrate the hard-won truth that when trust is tested, it can be reforged stronger than before. And in that confidence, I was ready for whatever and whoever came next. I invited both sides of my family and Lucas to a family round table at our Capitol Hill townhouse. My heart pounded as I pressed the buzzer at 6:30 p.m. I'd insisted on an early start so there'd be no second guessing on timing. The living room was arranged in a semicircle. My parents, David and Linda Mitchell, perched on one side of the navy velvet sofa. Avery beside them, arms folded but face unreadable. Cole leaning forward in a wing-back chair, and, on the opposite side, my in-laws, Karen and Mark Davenport. On a tufted leather loveseat, Allison in a straight-back chair next to them, and Lucas standing protectively at my shoulder. I'd set out a long wooden coffee table between us, covered with my organized binder, a second laptop, and printed copies of our trust and growth proposal. When everyone was settled, I tapped the microphone icon on my laptop and said, "Thank you all for joining me tonight. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity and moving forward together." I clicked to a full-screen slide titled Transparency, Accountability, Respect in bold teal letters. My voice felt steady as I continued. I want to share my vision for LumiTech, explain exactly where our seed funding stands, and propose a structure that ensures we all have skin in the game, but also boundaries that protect both family and business relationships. I began with the $200,000 0 cents term sheet from Bright Spark Ventures. I highlighted the valuation cap of $1,500,000 0 cents, the 6-month bridge interest at 4%, and the projected burn rate of $8,000 0 cents a month. I explained how we'd repaid the $50,000 0 cents family bridge in full on March 3, and how the remaining $150,000 0 cents was deployed across inventory, $50,000 0 cents, R&D $60,000 0 cents, and operating expenses $10,000 0 cents. Every dollar is accounted for, with vendor invoices and bank statements to back it, I said, distributing color-coded binders labeled investor call, bank records, expenses, and proposed agreement. My parents watched in silence as I worked through each line item. When I reached the family bridge section, I paused and looked at Dad. "I borrowed $50,000 0 cents last December," and said softly, "and repaid it from the seed round in March. To ensure this never becomes a source of contention again, I'm proposing a formal 12-month repayment schedule, equal installments of $4,166.67 monthly, funded by LumiTech's revenue share." I handed each of them a personalized repayment calendar printed on heavy stock. Mom lifted her pen, scanned the schedule, then sighed. "That actually makes sense," she admitted. Avery, who had stared at the floor, looked up. "I can support this," she said quietly. I felt a rush of relief but held my composure. The real turning point was yet to come. Next, I addressed the fake receipt incident. I clicked to a slide titled Lessons Learned, showing a redacted version of the holiday receipt, and a side-by-side comparison with the genuine bank statement. "What happened in Boulder was unacceptable," I said. "It broke trust and nearly derailed LumiTech's progress. We need safeguards." I proposed a family governance charter with 3 pillars. 1. No unauthorized sharing of private business documents. 2. Any dispute to be mediated by an agreed-upon neutral party. 3. A quarterly family business forum to discuss updates, limited to agenda items circulated 48 hours in advance. That's when Ben, my husband's cousin, raised his hand. He'd flown in from Seattle on short notice. "Harper, I appreciate the structure," he began, "but what about accountability if someone leaks again?" Before I could answer, I clicked to a slide showing our conflict escalation matrix, which outlined steps from informal conversation to formal mediation with a corporate counsel, each stage tied to escalating consequences, up to suspension from family events if confidentiality is breached. The room was silent as everyone absorbed the matrix, and I realized we'd created a framework no one could reasonably oppose. Cole then leaned forward, his brow knitted. "Can we talk about equity?" he asked. I nodded and opened to a slide showing my proposed family convertible note, which would convert to equity only if Lumitech raised a Series A round at a minimum valuation of $3 million, 0 cents. The note carried a 5% discount and no interest, capped at $60,000, 0 cents. This aligns our interests, I explained, and ensures my family benefits from our growth without stalling our next fundraising. Cole flipped through the papers, then looked at Dad. It's reasonable, he said. Better than a hostile note from a lawyer. At that, Dad cleared his throat. Harper, he said, I'm proud of how you've handled this. You turned our worst skepticism into a solid governance plan. My chest tightened. I'd so feared his final judgment, and here it was, respect. He reached toward me and placed a hand on my shoulder. Your generation needs a playbook like this, he added, glancing at Mark Reynolds beside him, who smiled and nodded in agreement. With the toughest approvals in hand, I moved to the final section, next steps and celebration. I invited everyone to the kitchen for a small reception I'd prepped, artisanal charcuterie boards, a tray of sparkling elderflower seltzer, and a custom birthday cake for Avery, which was fitting since this was also her first time supporting me publicly. As we flowed into the kitchen, the atmosphere had shifted from tension to cautious optimism. The Davenports and Mitchells intermingled naturally, discussing tax filings and marketing strategies instead of family rumors. Lucas sidled up to me, handing me a glass of seltzer. You did it, he whispered. I smiled, tears prickling unexpectedly. We did it, I corrected him, scanning the room as my mother chatted with my mother-in-law about next quarter's PR plan. Avery raised her glass. To Harper, may her tables always turn in her favor. I tapped my glass against hers, feeling the weight of every doubter lifted. Later that evening, as I closed down the townhouse and waved goodbye to our last guests, Avery clutching a binder labeled my notes, Cole pocketing a copy of the charter, and my parents hugging me tightly, I realized something profound had happened. I hadn't just reclaimed their trust, I'd given us all a blueprint for future collaboration. Instead of avoiding family and business collisions, I'd embraced them, built structures to manage conflict, and transformed skepticism into strategic fuel. By the time Lucas and I slid into bed at midnight, my phone had pinged with group texts from Dad. Excellent work tonight, Mom. I'm actually excited about Lumitech again, and even Karen Davenport. Thank you for including us. The final message was from Allison. Best family dinner ever. Thanks for turning tables with style. In those hours before sleep, I reflected on the journey. From the rooftop party where Avery's words stung, to the breakdown in Boulder, to this very moment of shared triumph. I realized that turning the tables wasn't about winning an argument. It was about rewriting the rules of engagement so that trust, transparency, and mutual respect formed the foundation of every future interaction. And as I drifted off, I knew that Lumitech's next chapter, both for the company and for my family, would be defined not by whispered doubts, but by the structures I'd put in place to ensure that every voice was heard, every concern addressed, and every stake, with its accompanying risk, honored. The tables had been turned, and in doing so, we'd all taken our rightful seats at the same boardroom table. I grew up hearing snippets of Granddad's and Grandma's story, how they met in 1948 at a sock hop in Buffalo, New York, and how Grandma, a school teacher, scraped together $120 0 cents each month from her meager salary to help pay the mortgage on the tiny clapboard house they bought for $12,000 0 cents. What I never knew until recently was the depth of their sacrifice. One afternoon, while rummaging through the attic for old photo albums, I discovered Granddad's wartime letters to Grandma tucked into a trunk marked Family Papers. In shaky cursive, he wrote of rationed sugar, cold nights in barracks, and the burning hope that once the war ended, he could return home and build something lasting with her. The letters detailed how, in 1952, Grandma took on a second job, tutoring neighborhood kids for 50 cents an hour, to cover an unexpected $300 property tax. Reading those letters felt like unearthing a secret code for resilience. I brought them downstairs to Mom, who paused mid-sip of her afternoon tea and wiped away a tear. "They never wanted to burden us with their struggles," she said softly. "They believed that if they held on, something better would come." The next day I framed one of Grandma's handwritten tax receipts, ink faded but indomitable, on my desk beside a miniature solar panel. A few weeks later, my friend and mentor Dr. Garcia invited me to her home for tea. In her study, she showed me a scroll of calligraphy Grandma had commissioned in 1960. In elegant brushstrokes it read simply, "Resilience." Grandma hung it above their kitchen door, a daily reminder that no setback was permanent. It struck me that long before pivot and iteration were business buzzwords, my grandparents lived those principles in their daily grind. Inspired, I reached out to Avery to help me transform those letters and receipts into an art installation, a tribute to perseverance. We spent an afternoon in her studio, she painting abstract solar flares around Grandma's calligraphy, I digitizing Granddad's words into a looping video backdrop. We finished with a small unveiling at our family roundtable, where everyone saw for the first time how our entrepreneurial spirit was rooted in their legacy. In that moment, I realized the side story of my grandparents wasn't just a footnote, it was a cornerstone. Their willingness to face uncertainty, to invest time and scarce resources without any guarantee of payoff, had flowed down through generations. It explained why I could stand in a marble-walled conference room and present detailed financial models with confidence, because somewhere in my DNA was the quiet faith that effort, no matter how small, compounds over time. That installation now hangs in Lumitech's warehouse, displayed next to our first prototype. Every time I pass it, I'm reminded that resilience is both an inheritance and a choice, a living side story that fuels the main narrative of every risk I take. I called the family town hall for a Sunday afternoon in late May, scheduling it in our Lumitech warehouse's open-plan conference space. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished concrete floors, and a long reclaimed wood table flanked by steel and glass shelving stocked with solar prototypes. I nervously arranged name cards for 15 relatives: Mom, Dad, Avery, Cole, my in-laws, even Aunt Evelyn and Cousin Emma, who'd flown in from Seattle. Lucas brought in trays of sandwiches and microgreen salads, all labeled with nutritional info and $8.00 per portion, a nod to my parents' favorite bit of corporate professionalism. At 2:00 p.m. sharp, everyone filtered in, exchanging tentative smiles. The air still carried the aftertaste of Boulder's fake receipt betrayal, but today the table felt different, charged with anticipation rather than accusation. I stood at the head, cleared my throat, and kicked off the meeting. First, a brief recap of our trust and growth agreement, highlighting the transparent payment schedule for the $50,000 0-cents bridge loan and the newly adopted family governance charter. As I spoke, I watched my mother's shoulders relax, her pen pausing over her notepad. My father crossed his arms, nodding thoughtfully instead of frowning. Next, I turned to antagonist's downfall, not as a public shaming but as a case study in why our new rules matter. I described the sequence in Boulder: the fabricated $15,324 0-cents holiday receipt, the humiliating lawyer threats, the erosion of trust, and contrasted it with our progress since. Linda's heartfelt Facebook post apologizing for her skepticism, 15 likes and 3 supportive comments. Avery's published Instagram story celebrating my seed round success, 2,000 views and counting, and Cole's newly launched Mitchell Family Innovation Fund, seeded with $25,000 0-cents from his own earnings, to back any relative's vetted startup ideas. I invited them to review metrics on a dashboard, family-submitted feedback scores, compliance with our confidentiality provisions, currently 100%, and a running tally of family forum agendas executed for since May, including tax strategy, PR plans, quarterly projections, and today's session. Then I shared the real climax. My mother, with a half-shaken tear in her eye, stood to deliver an apology in person. She admitted how her fear of volatility had led her to question me publicly, how she'd weaponized concern into control, and how ashamed she was that her doubt had nearly derailed my dream. Dad rose too, revealing that he'd taken 5 counseling sessions at $150 each, with a family therapist, to unpack the shame he carried from his own failed biotech venture in 2008. He thanked me for coaxing him to confront that past and pledged to continue therapy alongside me in our monthly Mitchell Family Support Group, an informal meetup we'd just chartered. Avery chimed in, her voice steady, announcing that she'd donated $10,000 of gallery earnings to a Lumitech scholarship for underrepresented women in STEM, a gesture turning her initial doubts into concrete action. The room held its breath as Cousin Emma, once the ripple starter of rumors, stood up and placed a check for $5,000, 0 cents on the table, saying, "Consider this an investment in both your business and our trust." Even my father-in-law, Mark Davenport, whose initial skepticism had mirrored my own family's, leaned forward to congratulate me on orchestrating this reconciliation and handed me a folder with a formal letter of endorsement from his firm, offering pro bono legal counsel for Lumitech's Series A negotiations. I watched these pivotal figures transform before me. The antagonists of my early chapters had become allies, their missteps acknowledged and their contributions recalibrated to support my vision. We closed the town hall with a group photo, smiles genuine, arms linked, and I felt the tension dissolve into an unmistakable sense of unity. Later, as we lingered over artisanal coffee, $4.00 a cup, and lemon poppy seed muffins, my parents quietly slipped away to the warehouse mezzanine. I found them there, Dad draping an arm around Mom's shoulders as they watched our solar panels cast prisms across the concrete. "We're sorry we doubted you," Dad said. Mom nodded, wiping her eyes. "But we believe in you now," she whispered. In that moment, I realized the true downfall wasn't theirs, but the collapse of old patterns, fear, judgment, secrecy, that had haunted us. By dismantling those, we'd built something stronger, a family not just bound by blood, but united in purpose. As I closed the warehouse doors behind me that evening, the twilight reflecting off the panels, I knew this chapter marked the end of distrust and the beginning of a legacy, where every setback in our family history became a stepping stone toward collective triumph. I never imagined that 2 weeks after our family town hall I'd be standing in Rustic Tavern's warmly lit dining room, raising a glass, surrounded by 60 investors, family members, and old friends. When I spotted my parents, David and Linda, side by side, beaming with pride, something inside me shifted. Dad clapped me on the back and said, "You did it, Harper, you earned every dollar." In that moment, the $1,500,000 0 cents Series A closing felt like more than financial validation. It was the culmination of our journey from distrust to collaboration. Stepping onto the small stage, I caught Avery's eye. Her painting of Grandma's calligraphy now hung behind me, Cole laughing with the Davenport cousins and Lucas holding 2 flutes so we could toast together. I raised my glass and said, "This night proves that transparency, respect, and shared vision can transform any crisis into opportunity." The applause washed over me and I realized how far we'd come from that rooftop birthday party where whispers almost derailed everything. Later, as the crowd mingled over charcuterie and elderflower seltzer, Mom approached with a small velvet box. Inside was her mother's antique Rolex date, just engraved on the back with, "To Linda, for every moment you seized." Her voice trembled as she slipped it onto my wrist. "I want you to have this because you've seized every moment you were given and more." I felt the weight of history settle on my arm, a tangible reminder that trust and time are intertwined. The following morning, I was back in our warehouse, standing beside Lumitech's first rooftop prototype as sunlight streamed through the skylights. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Draft that family trust and growth agreement today. We'll introduce you to our New York contacts." Then a message from Avery. "Congrats on your watch, but let's talk about the next art installation." I smiled, realizing that what had begun as fractured conflict had crystallized into coordinated support. Over the next weeks, we formalized a monthly Mitchell Davenport Innovation Forum, rotating between our family's homes and Lumitech's offices. We review financials, celebrate milestones, and troubleshoot challenges, always guided by the governance charter we drafted together. Gone are the whispered doubts. In their place are candid conversations, actionable insights, and the occasional healthy debate. If you'd asked me at the start of this journey what the most important skill for an entrepreneur is, I might have said pitch decks or market research. Now, I know it's the ability to bring people along with you, especially those who matter most. Numbers alone can't build a thriving startup. It's the human trust behind every contract, every dollar, every milestone that truly fuels growth. Each morning, as I slip my grandmother's Rolex onto my wrist, I'm reminded that emotional vulnerability, the raw honesty of admitting my own doubts, became the crucible that forged my resolve. Because true resolution isn't a finish line but a promise kept to yourself and those you lead. Tomorrow, Lumitech will power another Denver rooftop and launch pilot programs in 3 more states. My grandparents' legacy will live on in every kilowatt we generate, and at the heart of it all remains a simple truth. When transparency, structure, and shared purpose guide our choices, even the greatest betrayals can give way to the most enduring triumphs. Ready to turn your own setbacks into breakthroughs? Start by sharing your vision with someone you trust today.